Anyway, I want to introduce Steve Rohde, with whom I've worked over the last several years. Was in the, and I'm not going to go into his bio in details because you do have it and we're running out of time. But what I do want to say about Steve is when we were working hard at the local level, Southern California level, to get some real reform in the Patriot Act, Steve was everywhere. Now, he's a constitutional lawyer. He has a law firm. He was president of the ACLU Southern California and many other organizations, which you can read. And yet, he was out and about throughout Southern California. Ted, there's someone in the back. Speaking out as to why we needed serious reform of the Patriot Act. And I think ACLU acquitted itself very admirably, even though we didn't win big time this time around. But at the local level here and at the ACLU level, I think we did very good. Anyway, enough of this. Please let us welcome a liberal, constitutional lawyer activist in behalf of civil liberties and human rights, Steve Rohde.
First they came for the Muslims, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Muslim. Then they came for immigrants, detaining them indefinitely, solely upon the certification of the Attorney General. And I didn't speak up because I wasn't an immigrant. Then they came to eavesdrop on suspects, consulting with their attorneys. And I didn't speak up because I wasn't a suspect. Then they came to prosecute non-citizens before secret military commissions. And I didn't speak up because I wasn't a non-citizen. Then they came to enter homes and offices for unannounced sneak and peek searches, and I didn't speak up because I had nothing to hide. Then they came to reinstate COINTELPRO and resume the infiltration and surveillance of domestic, religious, and political organizations, and I didn't speak up because I no longer participated in any organizations. Then they came to arrest American citizens and hold them indefinitely without charges and without access to lawyers, and I didn't speak up because I would never be arrested. Then they came to institute TIPS, the Terrorism Information and Prevention System, recruiting citizens to spy on other citizens. And I didn't speak up because I would never be spied on. Then they came to institute the Total Information Awareness System, collecting private data on every man, woman, and child in America. And I didn't speak up because I couldn't do anything about it. Then they came for immigrants and students from selected countries, luring them under the requirements of special registration as a ruse to seize them and detain them. And I didn't speak up because I was not required to register. Then they came to secretly wiretap phone calls and emails in America, and I didn't speak up because no one was doing anything about it. Then they came for anyone who objected to government policy because it only aided the terrorists and gave ammunition to America's enemies. And I didn't speak up because I didn't speak up. And then they came for me. And by that time, no one was left to speak up. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a genuine pleasure to be with each one of you today, to be back in this wonderful hall where I have enjoyed being with you before. I want to thank Lucia Munoz for inviting me and for all the organizers for putting on what is shaping up to be an extraordinary conference on human rights today. I think many of you by now have detected the echo of the famous words of the Reverend Martin Niemöller, writing in 1937. The Reverend Martin Niemöller, a Protestant minister in Germany, an early Nazi supporter, saw what was happening around him, and eventually Martin Niemöller himself was sent to a concentration camp from which he survived to write his poem. First they came for the communists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews. Then they came for the Catholics. Then they came for me. And by that time, no one was left to speak up. And the words of the Reverend Martin Niemöller have come down to us through the generations as a cautionary tale, as a warning, that when a repressive government begins to move against the marginalized, when a repressive government moves against the least able to defend themselves, when a repressive government moves in violation of its founding principles, unless checked, such a government in time will move against its citizens and anyone else in its way. And it was in October of 2001, in the wake of 9/11, that the words of the Reverend Martin Niemöller came to mind, and I wrote the first version of the poem I began these remarks with. It was half as long as it is today. I have added ever new stanzas to it as ever new assaults on civil liberties and human rights have occurred. And it is as meaningful and as alarming and as much of a wake-up call today as it was 5 years ago. There's the story of the frog. You throw a frog in a boiling pot of water and the frog will jump out immediately to save itself. But you put a frog in a tepid bucket of water and you slowly, ever imperceptibly to the frog, turn up the heat and the frog will boil to death. For so many people across this country, unlike those of you who are taking a day today and many days and years since 1938 and before, who are aware of what has happened in this country and what is happening in this country, you get it. But for so many people in this country, for so many people called leaders in this country, the heat has simply been incrementally turned up month after month, year after year, as it relates to the violation of civil liberties and human rights. And those rights and the victims of those assaults are boiling to death.